insane, but just stepping it up like that, only criminals, people that wouldn't give up their guns would have guns, and then, innocent people can't do anything about it. And
exactly. Within 24 hours, L.A. would be on fire, guaranteed.
Absolutely. And one thing you see, banning things, all it does is create a black market, and all we're going to have to do is deal with just more criminal insanity, and nothing good can come from it. So there is a lot of people that are starting to understand that, though. But at the same time, the only thing that I'm scared of is, there'll be good cops that won't.
Well, I'll tell you this: if they order you to go confiscate guns, I mean, that you're asking to be killed if that happens. I would not follow that order if I was you. We'll be back. Stay with us. If you go to drudgereport.com, it's the best place to find it. In the middle column, top story, TSA expands to California train stations and bus terminals. Incredible footage by a guy that's reported for us before. His YouTube channel's George for Title. I want to get him on the nightly news tonight. And it shows what looks like more than 10 of them with dogs, sidearms, you name it, milling around. The video's up there at the site. We're going to pull some more stills out of it. But really, really scary to see that. And then I said this earlier in the show, and the crew went and looked it up. Bloomberg's had to respond to CBS, and he said it's illegal in New York to call for police to strike, if you're in the police force or government. And so I didn't mean that. He called for police to stand down nationwide until we turn our guns in. On the same show, and he agreed. It's on CNN's website. It's 38 minutes long. Both of them, commercial free there. CNN's cut out the ads. You can watch it. We played the clips in the first hour. They said ban everything, all guns except for black powder single shot. And they said that's their goal. And the UN treaty, of course, even Forbes has analyzed it. It allows registration and then confiscation of all semi-auto. The ATF last year wanted to ban all shotguns that are bottom loading, saying they're not sporting. Well, the Second Amendment's not for sporting. Very dangerous times. And I couldn't think of a better time to get former Congressman Bob Barr on the transmission, because he's been suing TSA, trying to find out from their leaks that Drudge Report and Infowars.com and Alex Jones have been listed. I've talked to TSA people where they're told, yes, that we're basically extremists because we're saying the TSA is outside its jurisdiction. They're not really police officers. We had a congresswoman on who's introduced bills to try to have them stop calling themselves officers. They're not just out of federal jurisdiction. They're not even sworn officers. The one thing if the FBI was running checkpoints, that would be a Fourth Amendment violation. This is a 10th Amendment as well. Bob Barr's a lawyer, so he can also, and a known constitutional scholar, he can break it down for us. But we've just got all this craziness accelerating right now, and an orgy of calls by Rupert Murdoch and Bill Kristol and Piers Morgan and Bloomberg and Michael Moore and all these Hollywood stars are saying, they're now being honest. They're saying, you know what, we want to ban your guns, period, give them to us. And it is so crazy. We've done the math. It's 0.3% to be in a mass shooting with 5 or more people killed out of the number of people that are shot. And you've got a very low chance of being shot, period. It's not a very common cause of death. It's just wild to see this authoritarianism. So I want to go over all that with Bob Barr, who was joining us about TSA and some updates on that. But first, sir, you've heard my little news brief here. I know you follow the news. What do you make of this authoritarian coming out of the closet we're seeing? Because it quite frankly is shaking me that they're this brazen.
Thank you, Alex. Always good to be with you and your many, many listeners. It's disturbing, but it's nothing new. The forces that wish to silence individual liberty and the ability of people to both express themselves freely and to protect themselves are always out there. They were there before 1776. They were there after 1776. They've been with us throughout all of the ups and downs of our country's greatness. And even though from time to time we, that is the proponents of liberty, yourself, myself, your listeners, and many other people across this land, even though once in a while we do win a victory at the polls or legislatively or through the courts, the forces against us never ever give up. This is one thing that I've learned through the years serving on the board of the National Rifle Association, for example, and that is even though, for example, in today's political climate, the current administration under President Obama dare not overtly push their gun control agenda, that doesn't mean that they have given up on it, nor does it mean that there are not other groups out there and individuals like Bloomberg in New York and Hollywood elites that are constantly pushing the envelope of their anti-freedom, anti-gun agenda.
Well said. I mean, I forgot how many hats you wear that you've been on the NRA board, and I just want to say something. In the last 5-6 years, I've seen the NRA go from really kind of a weak milquetoast stance to really getting aggressive now and coming out and saying, hey, he does plan outside of the Second Amendment to try to restrict it. Hey, this treaty is a threat. And I've been very critical of the NRA, but thanks to your leadership and others, we're starting to really see them get up on their hind legs. Can you give us some inside baseball on what's precipitated that? Because it's very good news.
Probably more than any other one word, it was the word Heston, Charlton Heston, when he took over the reins of leadership of the NRA back in the mid-late 1990s, and during which time he served for, I think, 5 years as president of the NRA. He gave it backbone and courage and enunciated a message that really galvanized and organized both internally within the NRA, our true core mission to protect the freedom embodied in the Second Amendment, and it gave a real voice outside of the NRA. It gave people real courage to stand up and say, yes, we support the NRA. Yes, we understand what they're doing. Yes, we're with you, Charlton Heston. That, I think, was a real turning point. I came on the board at the same time, so I saw it really develop under... And
you're still on the board. I just want to tell you, we like what you're doing. Thank God the NRA is not selling us out. We want to commend you, Congressman Barr. That's something else you worked so hard, former Congressman Barr. So we just want to thank you on air for that, because this is such a desperate fight, as you know.
Well, it is, and the venue is not just here in communities in America. It's not just in city halls like Mayor Bloomberg's in New York. It's not just at the capitals across the state. It's not just in Washington. It's on the banks of the East River in New York, at the United Nations, and other international organizations, as you've already talked about, and will keep hammering away at, I hope. The United Nations is, over the course of the next week until the very end of this month, busy drafting up an arms trade treaty, or AT&T, that would definitely impact negatively our Second Amendment guaranteed rights to defend ourselves through the use of a firearm in this country.
Very exciting that people seem to be waking up to this, but it's also frightening that the system doesn't care. It's just rolling forward. What is the sense of the NRA in your study of this, and also being an NGO so you can keep an eye on what's happening? Does it look like Obama's going to sign it and that the Senate might ratify it?
Yes and no. Yes to the first question, no to the second. Under the leadership of John Bolton, both when he served as the Undersecretary of State during the early years of the Bush administration, at which time he had as part of his portfolio the United Nations, and then later as our acting ambassador to the United Nations toward the end of the Bush administration, John Bolton and his immediate successor in that job did a tremendous job of holding the line against these UN encroachments into Second Amendment rights and policy in this country. That changed immediately when the Obama administration came in, took office in 2009, and with Hillary Clinton taking the reins at the State Department, they announced publicly in 2009 that the United States had shifted its position and would now support the drafting of an arms trade treaty. Now, even though the administration has said we have some objections to the language that they're crafting, my view is that when push comes to shove, when all the dust settles, that they would support it. But I do not believe that the Senate, as it's currently configured, even though the Republicans don't have a majority, I don't think the Senate would go along with it. There have been, I think, more than sufficient U.S. senators from both parties, this is not just a Republican position, who have said they would not vote to ratify an arms trade treaty.
Certainly fortuitous timing, the tragedy in Colorado, and they didn't waste any time seizing on it. As I mentioned earlier, I'd like to get your take on that and then segue into the TSA and what Liberty Guard's doing and how folks can get involved with you on that, standing up to the TSA, and get your take on where you see that fight going right now,
Sure.
where it currently is. Michael Moore saying ban everything down to flintlocks because that's all the founders would want us to have. He now speaks for them. And again, the ATF is saying they want to ban shotguns. They were saying last year that are bottom loading because it's only for sporting when we know it's not for sporting. What is your argument back to him saying that, oh, that's an old document, we need to update it? What is your response to Michael Moore?
Alex, it's hard to know where to start with somebody who takes such an idiotic, absolutely idiotic position as that. The whole notion of a militia, which our founding fathers, both from their experience and their study of history and their knowledge of the citizens being the last bulwark against the success of tyrannical government, they understood that the militia was and is the people of this country, the citizenry. And anybody who says, well, the militia is simply the National Guard or it's simply an organized group, and if you don't belong to it, you don't share in the Second Amendment rights guaranteed by the Second Amendment, has no concept whatsoever of either history or the real world out there. And not only that, but as the justices on the Supreme Court who voted in and supported the majority opinions in the 2008 and 2010 Second Amendment cases, the Heller case in Washington, D.C., and the McDonald case in Chicago, as those majority opinions understood and read, the Second Amendment was not limited, nor are the other amendments guaranteeing our freedoms, such as the First Amendment, limited simply to those physical things that existed at the time of the amendments drafting and incorporation. I mean, this idiotic position by Michael Moore, would he claim or would he take the position that the First Amendment only guarantees the printed word, not the movies that he makes, simply because that was the only medium of expression back in the late 18th century?
Exactly, and he acts like the thought is old when really the Constitution and Bill of Rights is new. What they want to go back to is 1,000-year-old law that slaves can't have weapons.
Well, a very good point, and part of the reason why, for example, gun laws were passed many years ago here in the South was to deny certain restrictions on gun laws were passed into laws.
Exactly.
Were to deny freed slaves, free black Americans, the right to possess firearms.
Well, just because the polls show America is becoming more pro-gun, I know you as an NRA board member know this, but for some of the new listeners, just because we're winning the fight for the Second Amendment with the hearts and minds doesn't mean we're going to win legislatively. Doesn't matter Obamacare was unpopular. They still got it, and that's what's really scary is the Supreme Court could have a good ruling on the Second Amendment, I guess because you guys at the NRA and others argued it, but then have a bad ruling on health care. We don't have much time with you. I know you've got to go in about 5 minutes. 1 minute on the health care bill, and then let's get into Liberty Guard and the TSA expanding out to our highways.
Well, Liberty Guard that I had, and your listeners can go to it at www.libertyguard.org. We're involved in both of these issues. We drafted, got signatures, and presented to the Supreme Court petitions against Obamacare, and we have been engaged in a long-running series of skirmishes with TSA